Welcome to the Institute of Jewish Knowledge and Learning. We are grateful to be here with Rabbi Amy Pessah. The program is Meditations and Melodies for Rosh Hashanah. Take it away, Rabbi Amy, and thank you again.
Thank you for asking me to be here. I'm just going to invite all of us to settle in from wherever we came from. So whether it was synagogue or the next room or an errand, wherever you have come from, perhaps it was a Rosh Hashanah lunch, wherever you have landed at this moment in time, I'm going to invite you to put your feet on the floor and to sit up as straight as you can without being in discomfort, palms facing upward. And an invitation to take 3 deep breaths, inhaling deeply through your nose and exhaling completely also through your nose, so keeping your mouth closed. And when you're ready, wiggling your fingers and your toes, opening your eyes. And I want to start with a story that many of you, I believe, will be familiar with, story of Reb Zusia. When Reb Zusia, the Hasidic master, was on his deathbed, he was crying, and his students couldn't get him to stop. No matter what they said to him, he just kept crying. And they said, "What are you crying for? Are you afraid when you reach the heavenly tribunal that you won't be as wise as Moses or as kind as Abraham?" And Reb Zusia said, no, I'm not worried at all. I'm not worried that I haven't been as wise as Moshe or as kind as Abraham. What I am most afraid of is when I get and I meet the Holy One, that he's going to say to me, "Zusia, why weren't you more like Zusia?" And so that is how I start this meditations and music. When Kim asked me to fill in relatively last minute, and I said, "Well, I can't do what Rabbi Akiva would do. I'm not Rabbi Akiva. I don't play guitar and I don't do things the way he does." And Kim just said, "Amy, be Amy." And so here I am being Amy. And I thank you all so much for joining me. We're going to do meditations and music and a little bit of stories and song. I hope so far your new year has been sweet. And I'd like to start by inviting us to settle in and let some of this Rosh Hashanah music wash over you. So if you're comfortable and you'd like to get in a more meditative pose, a contemplative space, you can close your eyes or lower your gaze. And if not, that's fine too. Just sit and allow the music to wash over you. Taking a few more deep breaths in. Breathing deeply and completely. Feeling your shoulders relax and drop. So I hope those tunes could get you a little bit in the Rosh Hashanah spirit. Don't know where all of you have been over the holiday, so I hope that these tunes at least ring familiar. And our time together will be, as I mentioned, with meditation and song and story and interactive, because for those of you who have learned with me before, I like to hear from you as well. So a poem called The Sound of Holiness by Alden Soloby. When God in creating began to create, silence hovered over the face of the deep. And God said, Tekiah, Trua, Tekiah. Holiness has a sound. Part swoosh of blood in the veins, part hum from the edge of the universe, part stillness, part vibration, part life entering a newborn, part life leaving the deceased, part dissonance, part resonance, a sound that can only be heard with the heart. When God in creating began to create, God spoke in music, giving us the shofar as a vessel to hold the divine voice, and as an instrument to summon awe and wonder, so we might become, in our own lives and in the world, Tekiah Gedolah. So a pause and a question for each of you to think about. What does it mean for you to be a Tekiah Gedolah? You can drop a thought in the chat or just keep it to yourself. But what does it mean to be Tekiah Gedolah? And it might change. Today's answer might be different than tomorrow's answer. But just a inquiry and a wondering of what does it mean to be this Tekiah Gedolah. As I was thinking about this and being in services, you know, it's sort of that moment of how long can the person hold their breath for, right? And everyone is standing and watching and waiting and wow, that was really long, or that was okay. It was, you know, long, but not really long. And then you have people who are like, oh my gosh, I thought they were going to pass out, right? So there's this sense of longevity that talks to us about Tekiah Gedolah. And then there's also not only the longevity, but there's also a sense of sticking to it, sticking with it, practice, right? Expanding our lung space, making our lungs even just 1 second wider, longer, so that they can hold the breath. So in thinking about your own sense of Tekiah Gedolah, is it the longevity? Is it the fanfare? Is that, you know, I really want to make a splash? Or is it, I'm just going to stick with it. I'm going to keep my breath as calm as I can. And so what does that mean to you? I noticed there were a few responses in the chat, so I want to get to those and see what our friends have written. To be healed. I don't know what Tekiah Gedolah is. Yes, that's it. It's for the shofar chant. So the Tekiah Gedolah is that the last blast that is the longest. Tekiah is the sound, and Gedolah means large or big. So it's the very large, big sound at the end. Thank you for asking that clarification. That Tekiah Gedolah, that long, loud blast, person who is blowing the shofar holds it for as long as they can. Oftentimes there's a moment of relief and release afterwards. So where does that play into your Tekiah Gedolah, right? So often we think, I want to just, show up, do this as long as I can, give it my best. But then what about that moment of rest afterwards, right? That moment of, okay, I did it. I'm going to allow myself to rest. A few more comments to put yourself out into the world in the best, biggest way that you can manage. Beautiful. Expressing and sharing of spirit and neshama. Beautiful, beautiful. One more comment to interrupt the nonstop voice in my head so I can hear something sweet and new. Yes, I guess you have the same voice in your head that I have in my head. Maybe they're saying different things, but it's still this, chattering on and on and on. And so, when we have these shofar blasts, it really stops us in our tracks, literally and figuratively, right? We are stopped. And so hearing that blast can take us out of the nonstop voice ruminations, questions, comments that we hear going on in our own heads, and that we can maybe shift gears and hear something new and sweet.
Hi, it's Debbie. And Amy, you said something that really touched me today. You used the word fanfare. And I was at the Romamu service, and being that there was no shofar yesterday, today I really looked forward to it.
Yes.
The Godalah was a fanfare this time. He did it in three parts, which was so interesting, because normally I'm expecting just this
right. Yeah.
continuous. And the way it broke down, and when you said fanfare, I knew I had to share that because it was just so different.
I've never heard that before. I'm so curious what that must have sounded like. It sounds like, 3 different movements of the last shofar blast, right? But that sense of a fanfare. Yes. Thank you. So a few words of wisdom now from Rabbi Dov Ber Pinson, who is also talking about creation.
In the beginning of the Torah, Nasa Adam, let us create man. All the commentaries ask, who's this us? Who's the plural? Nasa Adam means the Creator is talking to all of creation. That everything in creation is creating you. That when you're born at any point of time, the entirety of creation created you. You are linked to every single scavenger or worm, to every single star in the galaxy. Everything is part of you. And everything says, in this year, at this date, at this time, this neshama has to come down to this world because the world needs it. It cannot be the same. The stars cannot be the same, and the lions in Africa cannot be the same, and the people living in Tibet cannot be the same. No one in the world can be the same without you. Who says this? Not you. God says this. Hashem says this.
I found that particularly beautiful. This sense of when God says in the Torah, let us create humans in our image. Who is God talking to? God is talking to all of creation, right? So that we are all connected in this web. And with Rosh Hashanah being the birthday of the world, what does it mean for us to be connected to the stars and the worms and the lions in Africa and the people in Tibet? And then how does that understanding impact how we live our own lives? How do we think about the decisions that we make in terms of sustainability? How do we realize that we are part of creation in a way that means we have a responsibility, and that we are no better or no worse than everything that is part of creation? And so I'm going to invite you just to think about how that impacts your understanding of what it means to be a human, what it means to be a Jew, what it means to be living in this time and age, this era, 5784, 2023, moving into the new year. And what do you want to take upon yourself that will ensure to remind you all year long that you are part and parcel of creation? It's I'm going to let you all think about that for a minute or so, and then open it up if anybody has something they'd like to share. Kim.
Who shall die by fire and who shall die by flood have such new meanings this year? Terrifying meanings.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Right. This sense of oftentimes, and again, I don't want to speak in broad generalizations or stereotypes, but I think there's a sense of human beings feeling that, you know what, if there's a problem, we can fix it, right? We can always fix it. And Mother Nature, as we have been shown over these past several years and decades, but especially with the planet temperature rising, more fires, more floods. The hurricanes are now more severe for those of us who are in South Florida. And you're right, Kim, it is really terrifying, right? The language of the liturgy takes on such a deeper, stronger meaning. I think we've said it in the past, but maybe if you lived in Northern California or out west where there were fires regularly, it was like, yeah, you said it, but now there's so much of our planet that is burning. Those people who were in, the New York tri-state area, and then even through to Chicago and the Midwest, were getting smoke and fire coming from Canada. And so it's really impacting all of us. And what do we do? How do we figure out a way that we can make the greatest impact possible in our little world, right? What can we do to help decrease our own consumption, to help limit, maybe you don't take an extra flight a year, maybe you try to not buy as much. Maybe you invest your money in companies who are also helping to support the planet. Maybe you want to plant trees. Maybe you want to start a garden. Maybe you want to find some butterflies to have a butterfly garden. Like, there are ways that we can think globally and act locally. But I agree with you, Kim. It is definitely scary what we're seeing. Yes, plant trees. And let's see, Richard says, reminds me of Buber's I Thou, that the Holy One is in all relationships and to value all of them. Yes, beautiful. Yeah, seeing ourselves really in deep relationship. So one of the things, Donna, I'll get you in 1 second. One of the things I've been thinking about recently, and I wrote a little piece about wildflowers. So I was in Colorado this past summer, and I was hiking a lot and noticing that there were so many new flowers I didn't know the names of. And I was thinking, like in the past, I never really cared about, and I didn't care. It wasn't something that was important to me. And so as I was walking and I kept looking and I felt this deep connection, I wanted to know the names of the flowers. And so I challenged myself. I would take a picture on my phone. There's a great feature on the iPhone where you can just click information. It tells you the name of the flower or the plant or the bird. And so I would challenge myself, and I really wanted to learn as many new flowers as I could. And then I was questioning, like, why was this important to me? Like, why does it matter if I know the names of the flowers? And then it came to me that when we name something, we come into a deeper relationship with it. And so maybe that is something you want to explore this year, learning the names of plants, trees, flowers, your neighbors, the cashier at the store that you go to regularly, your mail carrier, right? By coming into relationship with people and learning their names, we see them in a different way. Donna. You have to unmute.
I actually put my hand down. I thought that I heard the rabbi, what was just on, say that we are all a part, basically, of the one, that we're all created. Without us, the world would just be a little bit different. Did I hear that correctly or no?
That God felt the world needed you and your neshama. And so that was the reason that you were brought down at this time. So yes, the world would be different if we weren't here. Each one of us plays a role in creation.
I was interpreting it just a little bit different, but in regard to what you're saying, I was listening to Park Avenue yesterday, and the sermon was about Heschel. And he brought up the book, The Missing Piece by Silverstein. And what you said reminded me of it. When we're so busy in our lives, you walk by, you didn't know the flowers, didn't recognize them, but are we more whole when we're broken, or are we more whole when we're whole? So with the missing piece, you have to move a little bit slower, and then you can stop and smell the flowers and ask. So it's interesting that you brought that up.
Yes.
I actually just ordered it.
Oh, I believe it was Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk who says there is nothing so whole as a broken heart. So the answer to your question is yes and yes. Yes, we're whole when we're whole, and we're whole when we're broken. A story.
What I wanted to really say is that if we're all a part of the one, I think that sometimes we should realize that we really feel each other, and to acknowledge that. I've had a couple of situations in my life where people were going through whatever they were going through, and they pull away. And you can feel the love, and you can feel the pulling away as well. So it's not just really knowing the name of somebody, the neighbor, but acknowledging that we feel each other from a soul level.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I totally get that. You know, it was beautiful and wonderful to be with so many people on the high holidays. I know we've been easing back into larger groups for a year or so now, and finding myself really feeling people, exactly what you were saying, Donna. There was a young man who I saw, and I could just feel his sadness. And I said, you know, can you just give me a call? You don't have to talk to me if you don't want to, but if you want to talk to me, please find me. Right? So it's really feeling and being open to connecting to people on a soul level. And then hopefully at least doing our little part for a tikkun, for a repair, and to help support one another, because we all are going to need help and support at some point in our lives if you are human and live on the planet. A story. Once a year, Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov would talk to his senior disciples. And this year, he decided he needed someone to blow the shofar for Rosh Hashanah. It was going to be Rabbi Ze'ev Kitsis. And he says to him, I want you to study all the kavanot, all these Kabbalistic meditations that pertain to the shofar. So that when you're blowing the shofar, you're going to be meditating on these Kabbalistic meditations, these intentions. And so Rabbi Zev applied himself to this task with great joy and trepidation, joy over this incredible privilege that had been accorded to him, and trepidation over the immensity of the responsibility. He studied the Kabbalistic writings that discussed the multifaceted significance of the shofar and the sounds and what these sounds achieve on the reality of various levels, the various chambers of the soul. It was quite complicated. And in order to remember, he prepared all of these teachings on what we would call a little cheat sheet, so that he could have them right in front of his face as he blew the shofar. And finally, after weeks of practice, the day arrives. It's the morning of Rosh Hashanah, And Rabbi Ze'ev stood at the platform in the center of the Baal Shem Tov synagogue amidst the Torah scrolls and surrounded by a sea of talit draped bodies. And then at the table at the southeast corner of the room stood the Baal Shem Tov, his master. And his face was aflame, was radiant and shining. An awed silence filled the room in anticipation of the climax of the day, the piercing blasts and the sobs of the shofar. Rab Zev reached into his pocket and his heart froze. The paper had disappeared. He distinctly remembered placing it there that morning, but now it was gone. Furiously, he searched his memory for what he had learned, but in his distress over the lost notes, it just incapacitated his brain. His mind completely went blank. Tears of frustration filled his eyes, and now he was stuck blowing the shofar like a simple horn, without any kavanot, without any of these Kabbalistic meditations. And so, with despair in his heart, Rabbi Ze'ev blew the sounds of the shofar, all of them required by law, avoiding his master's eye. He was so embarrassed. He did the best that he could, put his head down, and walked off the bima. At the conclusion of the day's prayers, the Baal Shem Tov made his way to the corner where Rabbi Ze'ev was sobbing under his talit. Good yontiv, Reb Zev, called the Baal Shem Tov. That was the most extraordinary shofar blowing we heard today. But Rebbe, in the king's palace, said the Baal Shem Tov, there are many gates and many doors, leading to many halls and many chambers. The palace keepers have great rings holding many keys, each which open a different door. But there is one key that fits all the locks, a master key that opens all the doors. The kavanot, these intentions, are keys, each unlocking another door in our souls, each accessing another chamber in the supernal worlds. But there is one key that unlocks all of the doors that open up for us, the innermost chambers of the divine present. That master key is a broken heart. And so whether or not you think you have the right key, the right lock, the right, what's that thing called that you unlock the door with if your car is stuck, that you jimmy a car door? There's some fancy word for it. I forgot what it's called. Whatever your tool of choice is, none of them compare to the vulnerability and the openness of what it means to pray, to connect, to love with an open, broken heart. At this point, I'd like to invite us to go into a meditation focusing on what it means to have a broken heart. How do we live with a broken heart? How do we do our best to repair our broken hearts? So I'm going to invite you all to find a comfortable place. Your feet firmly planted on the floor. Your palms facing upward. Your eyes closed or your gaze lowered. Relaxing your shoulders. Taking in a deep breath, breathing in deeply through your nose, exhaling completely through your nose. Feeling your feet connected to the floor, rooted, imagining roots coming out of the soles of your feet, connecting you even more tightly to the floor itself, and sending those roots down through the foundation into the earth, continuing about 6 to 8 inches so that you feel completely rooted, grounded, connected to the earth. And now imagining at the top of your head where your crown chakra is, in the middle of your head, up at the top, imagining a gold thread or a gold cord, slowly extending upward, passing through the ceiling, through the roof of the structure in which you find yourself, up into the sky, past the clouds, and continuing it far out into the atmosphere, so that you feel as if you have become a bridge between heaven and earth. Taking in 3 more deep breaths. Bringing your attention and your mind's eye to the center of your chest, where your beautiful heart is. Noticing any sensations that you might be feeling, tingling, hot, cold, nothing, all of it is perfectly perfect for you. Taking a look at your heart, noticing its strength, its beauty, and its brokenness. Those events that occurred during this past year or years prior, traumas, challenges, struggles, joys, laughter, anything that could have broken your heart. Taking about 2 minutes on your own to locate, to see the map of your broken heart. Imagining that you're able to visualize what your heart looks like. Maybe you notice a crack when one event occurred. Maybe you notice a little nick or a scratch or an opening or a different event occurred. Taking a couple minutes to explore the topography and the texture of your heart. shining a light, going a little bit deeper, noticing those broken places in your heart that might be older, that might have scarred over. See if you can notice them too. Not going back and reliving the pain, rather observing and noticing. There's a beautiful Japanese art form known as kintsugi. And with this art form, they take broken pottery, broken shards that have been cracked, and they use an exquisite gold paint. And they paint gold lines over where the cracks of the pottery, of the ceramics, of the porcelain, whatever the item was. And it is with the addition of this gold paint that the originally cracked vessel becomes even more beautiful. And so at this point, I invite you to take your imaginary gold paint and either in your mind's eye or using your hand and pretending that it's a paintbrush, bring it up to your heart and begin to go back over those cracks, those broken places in your heart, applying gold paint so that your broken heart is now able to take on some new shine, has new sheen. Doesn't mean that we are forgetting. It means that we are acknowledging, creating something different, creating something beautiful from the challenges and the struggles and the pain that we have experienced as being human. Please take a minute or two to apply this gold kintsugi paint to your broken heart. And when you feel like you've completed what you want to complete for now, let the paintbrush rest. Going back to the gold thread that you had extended out into the atmosphere, slowly see it retracting, moving down through the heavens, the clouds, slowly bringing it back through the roof, through the ceiling, and retracting it into your crown chakra, still allowing about 1/4 of an inch to not recede completely. And going back to the earth, feeling the roots that you had sent down into the earth, retracting those as well, bringing them back through the soil, up the foundation, through the floorboards, back into the soles of your feet. Placing your hands over your heart. Taking 3 deep breaths, inhaling deeply through your nose, exhaling completely also through your nose. When you're ready, wiggling your fingers and your toes, opening your eyes, coming back to our Zoom room with all of your beautiful kintsugi hearts. One of my favorite teachings about forgiveness that I like to revisit this time of year, I think fits in very nicely with the idea of a broken heart, because oftentimes our hearts are broken because we are disappointed. We're disappointed, we're hurt, things didn't go the way that we wanted to, the way that we had envisioned our life playing out. Well, apparently the screenplay didn't go as we had hoped it would have been written. And so here we are. And what do we do? How do we live with this reality? What do we do? How do we forgive people who might have put us in this situation, or we feel have hurt us in a way? And at this time of year, we're told, how do we forgive people? What do we do when we take a cheshbon hanefesh, this accounting of our soul? How do we ask for forgiveness when we've made a mistake? And how do we hope and encourage other people to ask us for forgiveness? And so one of these teachings comes from Thich Nhat Hanh. And I'd like to share that teaching when he asks, do we have to forgive everybody?
Should there be volume?
There should be. I have a new tech person, so you just have to bear with him for a minute.
We forgive him.
Perfect.
Hold on. Hold on.
To share sound. The volume is still not going. We can't hear the volume. I can try.
Hold on 1 second. Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Not sure why you can't hear the volume. Let's try now. Can you hear it now? Can you hear it now?
No, let me try it.
Try one more time.
No, it's okay. I'm going to try it.
Why do we have to forgive everything? And how can I do that?
All of us are unskillful at times. And when we are not skillful, we suffer and we make the other person suffer. And that person may be the person we love. So unskillfulness is something that happened to everyone. And we desire that when we are unskillful and we suffer and we make the other person suffer, we wish to be forgiven. But that is not enough. We have to learn from our unskillfulness. So we may ask the other person that not only his or her forgiveness, but also her support. We may ask him or her like this, dear one, I am unskillful at times. So when I say something or do something unskillful, I suffer and I make you suffer. It's very kind of you to forgive me, but I like to ask you a favor that when I am about to say something or to do something unskillful, please warn me. Mm-hmm. Please remind me so that I will refrain from doing that, because it may become a habit. And after I have committed the unskillful act, not only you forgive me, but you help me, you remind me that this is unskillfulness, so that next time I will not repeat at the same time. So we need to practice, and we need the help of the other person to help us practice. And the other part of the answer is that in order to forgive, you have to see the suffering and the unskillfulness of the other person. The other person may not want to hurt us, to make us suffer. It's only that she has or he has a lot of unskillfulness. And that is why if we recognize that has come from the unskillfulness of that person, we will not be angry and we can forgive easily. And when we look at him or her and see the suffering in that person, which is at the base of all kind of acts and words that make you suffer. When we see the suffering in him or in her, when you understand that suffering, when you know that that person is not capable of handling, of taking care of the suffering in him or in her, they become a victim of that suffering. And we are only victim number 2 or number 3 only. When we are able to see the suffering in him or in her, and see that that person is victim of his own suffering, and then it's easy to forgive.
So these words from Thich Nhat Hanh, I find particularly poignant at this time of year. Like, how are we able to see another as unskillful instead of using a different adjective to describe their behavior? How could they be so inconsiderate, obnoxious, rude, like whatever we feel like we would want to say? That I'm using nicer words. You might want to put in your own words that are less nice, right? But once we shift the conversation to unskillfulness, that implies that there is a skill that can be learned, right? And that the person is not necessarily doing what they did with intention or with malice. It's that the person is unskilled. They don't have the skills needed to communicate effectively, to listen the way that you would like them to listen, to show up the way that you would want them to show up. And so if we're able to see another through this lens of unskillfulness, I believe that it would allow us to, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, see the suffering in another. And then from that suffering, we will be able to feel compassion, which will lead us on the path to forgiveness. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts about this idea of unskillfulness. Do you find it to be helpful? Do you find it to be an excuse? What are your thoughts about looking at ways that your heart might have been broken based on unskillfulness versus malintent? And I'm not keeping my head in the sand and saying nobody ever has any malintent. And like, I believe that there are things that, you know, probably are outside the bounds of this conversation, and the things on quite the extreme: abuse, neglect, trauma, all of that, I'd like to put in the parking lot. And I want to talk about everyday actions, smaller conversations and experiences that we have. Thoughts about unskillfulness and seeing the suffering of another as a way to move us toward greater forgiveness. Donna.
I'm only raised my hand because nobody else did.
That's okay.
I think using the terminology unskillfulness takes away judgment of the other, and stating that they're just not skilled in whatever the art is that they just did, it neutralizes the feeling.
Definitely. Yes, I can just vouch. I've personally used it in my own life, and it has transformed relationships with people, right? That I've been able to say, look, whatever comment that person made to me, that was really unskillful. And so I use that language a lot in my life. Bonnie does as well, I see. And I see Karen said she loved that word. So there's just thinking about unskillfulness. And I like what you said, Donna, that it takes away the judgment, right? It just becomes more of a statement of that person doesn't have the skills. Any other thoughts about forgiveness and unskillfulness? Yes, Kim.
I would dream of the conversation where whoever it is, please, warn me that I'm about to step in the shit. That would be a dream, but it's a good start for me to mind that it's unskillfulness.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for that. It's hard, right? It's so, and the way he presents it, I just find it so, it's like he says it very matter-of-factly and with such calm and tranquility. And like you said, Kim, like, seriously, could I get the people in my life to say to me, I'm noticing that you're about to say something that might be hurtful. I would like to call it to your attention, right? As opposed to, why do you always, what's wrong, yeah. So again, just an appreciation for the possibility of how we might begin to think about moving our conversations in our relationships in this new year, right? And again, it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight, but thinking about unskillfulness, being able to see the suffering in another, being able to then share compassion, feel compassion, and then moving us towards forgiveness. Any other thoughts about this before we begin to come in for a landing? Okay. So one other thought, the Unatana Tokef prayer, the one someone had mentioned earlier, Kim, about who by fire, who's going to live, who's going to die. And then after that whole list, it says, Uteshuva, utefila, utsedaka, ma'avirin et roa hagzera. So tefillah, teshuva, and tzedakah can lessen the severity of the decree. I found this very beautiful teaching from Rabbi Joseph Metzler, who combines a little bit of the serenity prayer with the Unatana Tokef. And he writes the following: for the things we can change, there is teshuva, there is realignment. For the things we cannot change, there is tefillah, there is practice. There is prayer. For the help we can give, there is tzedakah, there is justice. Read it one more time. For the things we can change, there is teshuva, realignment. For the things we cannot change, there is tefillah, prayer. For the help we can give, there is tzedakah, justice. As we move into this new year, how will you enact and embody teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah? How will you realign? How will you pray? How will you bring more justice to the world? Because as we started with Reb Pinson in the beginning, you are you because God decided the world cannot continue without your neshama, without your soul. And so when you show up, you bring your own realignment, realigning your soul to the rest of the larger soul body, the God field. And what Reb Zalman teaches on Rosh Hashanah is that we are charging the God field. So when we show up and that we are in alignment, we are adding to that charging of the God field. That I like to call it the World Wide Web, but it's that sort of web that exists throughout all of the universe. And how are you going to show up in your tefillah, in your prayer this upcoming year? And what will you do to bring more justice to the world? Teshuvah, tefillah, tzedakah, all of these help to lessen the severity of consequences, harshness of the decree, random acts depending on your theological beliefs, but all of these, teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah, will help us move into the new year. So I'm going to try one more time to send us off with a video. I hope that it will work. And if not, we'll move to plan B.
All right, here we go. Can everybody see it?
Yes.
All right. Can everybody hear it?
Nope.
No, can't hear it? Can't hear it, huh?
I know the answer.
You know the answer?
Yeah, I've been searching for the answer to this practical question. If you go up to the menu icons on the top and click on Control Center, it's the two little sliders. Zoom says you have to turn off mic mode voice isolation when you're sharing a video in full screen.
Okay, let's try again.
Standard. I was looking for that for months.
Thank you. Let's see if it works.
Hold on. Get back in. Hold on. Sorry. Start from the beginning. Everybody can see it?
Yeah.
Take two.
A new year rising, a new beginning. Lift your head up, turn yourself around, the world is spinning. Feel the magic of a new day. Open your heart to a fresh start, send your fears away. You've made mistakes, you feel it. You got what it takes, believe it. Any wrong can be made right, just forgive and you need not fight. Shana tova umetuka, it's Rosh Hashanah. Shana na 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 tova umetuka, dip your apple in the honey, it's Rosh Hashanah.
So many new hopes waiting to find you. Open your eyes, the dreams you prize are all around you. The smiles are hiding, no use in guessing. Make up your mind, go out and find life's simple blessings. This is your time, you feel it, how sweet it is, believe it. Any wrong can be made right, just forgive, you need not fight. Shana tova umetuka, it's Rosh Hashanah. Shana na 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 tova umetuka, dip your apple in the honey on Rosh Hashanah. Shana na 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 tova umetuka, hear the sounds of jubilation. This Rosh Hashanah. Yehi ratzon sheniyeh lerosh lo zanav. Sweet in life for those around us with joy and love. Avinu malkeinu, chalenu banenu. Hear our prayer, O Lord, this hour. Inscribe us in the book of life. Shana na 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 tova umetuka, dip your apple in the honey on Rosh Hashanah. Shana na 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 tova umetuka, hear the sounds of jubilation. It's Rosh Hashanah. Give us life, Lord, and sustain us. Oh, deliver us to salvation. Give us life, Lord, and sustain us. Oh, deliver us to salvation.
In this new year,
On Rosh Hashanah,
make your loved ones smile.
it's Rosh Hashanah,
Open your hearts to one another
it's Rosh Hashanah,
and begin life anew.
it's Rosh Hashanah.
Yes, I will share the link. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for exploring the themes that we looked at today, the idea of creation of the world, the ideas of brokenheartedness being the grand key to all of the chambers of our soul, being there to support one another, being connected to our planet, to all the sentient beings that share this home, and sending you off with joy for the new year. And of course, just had to go back to Thich Nhat Hanh and his notion of unskillfulness and how that can help maybe even bring greater joy to our relationships because of the sense of understanding and compassion that we can feel towards others. So may we take all of these elements as we go into the new year, almost moving into we're in the 10 days, moving up until Yom Kippur. So thank you very, very much for being here. Shana Tova Umetuka. May you all have a sweet, happy, healthy new year. May you be written in the book of life. May you be sealed as well. Thank you so
Amen.
much.